Hey, welcome back. So in this video, let's create a character that is somewhat stylized, maybe somewhat, almost cartoony, but it's going to be a sci-fi, like a zombie, bodybuilder villain. I don't know if he's a villain, but he's definitely kind of aggressive looking, right? So to get started, what I'm going to do is let's jump into ZBrush. And in ZBrush, we just have to decide what would be the best place to start on something like that. Because I'm doing this as a tutorial, and obviously all of you guys are gonna follow me, right? Assuming, not just watching, but following. I think it would be better if we chose a base mesh or a base model to start with so everyone can follow. I can, of course, also attempt to do it from scratch with the sphere, but I think that's going to be a lot more advanced and a lot more time consuming. As I make these videos, I always try to figure out the fastest way to the finish line, and it's not necessarily the most impressive sometimes, but it's always in mind that the fact that this is a tutorial, right? So what I'm going to do is I can grab this male, and let's look at a few of these for someone who is relatively new and you are starting a brand new character, right? You do have a female base model here. If you look at the male, let's just sneak a peek at this one. You can see what that looks like, right? So this is a perfect base to start with. If you go into your subtools, you can see it's just one solid subtool. There's no additional pieces to this, right? If you turn on your polyframe, you can see that there's just one solid piece, right? And that's important to understand when choosing your base mesh. If you go into geometry, you can also see that this model comes with 3 subdivision levels. You can always dial this down, and then you have kind of a low-res version of it, which is amazing for base meshes, right? It only has 15,000, almost 16,000 polygons, right? So this is pretty perfect for like a mid-level, mid to low poly game character, right? Now, what would be another option? Like, there are more options besides this guy, and there are. And what you could do if you want to explore other options, you could do a couple things. You can go to mannequin, and in here you are also given a few different things. So, for example, if I do, let's say I choose one of these. You are also given something like this, and the cool thing about the mannequin is that you can actually change the pose of it, right? So you can grab like the move, and you can change you can move these around and change the position of it. Maybe you're creating kind of a crazy alien and you want a base mesh, right? So you could always do that, or maybe you're doing something super cartoony. So you get the idea. So this is also very, very powerful to start with, right? You can even create like something super dynamic as far as the pose go, and then start sculpting. So that's an option too. And then if you wanted to change this into an actual sculptable mesh, you want to go to adaptive skin, and then you could do a preview, right? That's going to be a preview. And then if you are happy with it and you want to start sculpting, you can go into make adaptive skin. You can see a new tool was created. And now if I jump into this one, this is no longer a mannequin or Z-spheres, right? So I can't change the pose anymore. Now it's actually a solid base mesh, and you can see what that looks like. If you auto group it, you could see that it's just one solid piece of mesh, right? So that would be another way of how you could start, sculpting something. And then there's more, right? Let's go to Lightbox. Of course, we have Z-spheres. That's the same thing, right? Instead of the mannequin, you're also given Z-spheres. So let's choose one of these. And these are awesome, right? So same thing, you can move these around a little bit if you needed to adjust something, change the position. You can change the scale of things. Maybe I want this head smaller, right? I can go to scale and just scale down the head. I could do that. So this would be a really good start as well. And then same thing, if you want to turn this into a sculptable mesh, you go into adaptive skin and just do make adaptive skin. And then you are given a skin tool, and same thing, let's go ahead and auto group it. You can see just one solid blob, right? And way easier than sometimes starting from a sphere, right? So that's cool. What would be some other options? So let's keep looking. Let's see what else we got. We'll go to the light box, and so all these are amazing. Take advantage of these. Let's go out. Let's jump into demo project. In here you have something called Super Average Man. Now if I click on Super Average Man, let me double click on that. So in our case, let's just go with this male base. I think this is going to be perfect, right? And let's assume that you're relatively new to ZBrush, and we're just going to go step by step. All right, so I have this. If I turn on the polyframe once again, I can see it's just one solid base, right? So the first thing I would like to do, and I can toggle between the perspective mode and orthographical mode by clicking on this button here, and you can see this is like a flat 2D view. And then if I go back in, you can see this is kind of like a camera realistic view, right? And you can control this camera as well. If you want to go to draw, in here you have the camera settings, and currently it's set to 50. And honestly, I usually like to keep it on 35 by default. So I'm going to switch mine to 35, and that's going to be the perspective view of our character. And to toggle between these two, you can just click P, and that's going to quickly jump between the two. So that's important, right? I'm going to be doing this entire time as I model. I always like to switch between these two cameras. So in this case, let's go into the orthographic view. If you hold on the Shift key, it's just going to snap into a view. So my ZBrush doesn't really have a quad view port, but if you hold on the Shift key, you can very quickly just jump between different camera views and give you, a perfectly straight view. So you kind of get used to the fact that you don't really need the quad view. You could just use the Shift key to snap between them very quickly, and that works really well. So let's go ahead and snap to the front one, and let's just think about the fact that we want to create our character with completely different proportions, right? Before I start doing anything, I do want to get rid of the 3 subdivision levels. I'm going to go ahead and go to the lowest, and I'm going to go ahead and delete the highest. So now we don't even have the high version, unless we, of course, press Control D, right? If we press Control D, you can see it starts to subdivide again, and I can very quickly get back to level 3, but I don't need to do that. Again, I'm going to go to level 1, and now I have almost 16,000 polygons, and this is great. Once again, a great start. Now, the first thing I would like to do is I would like to detach his head and keep it separate. And honestly, I would like to detach a few different limbs to kind of be able to focus on the character separately instead of treating it as one mesh. And I think as a tutorial, that's going to be a lot easier to follow as well. Right, so how do we detach a character's head? So if we look a little bit closer, we can see that it's completely connected, right? And usually what you want to do is you want to find a loop that you can select and then detach the head. So in this case, if you look at this topology, this flowing topology, right, all these squares, what would be the first loop that you see that makes sense as far as like cutting the head off that's clean? Well, all of these don't make sense, right? Because there's like all these corners. This one right here, up here, starts to make a little bit sense. So you could use that. There's a little strangeness here, which we can easily clean up. But the first clean loop is going to be this one right here, right? You can see how it's nice and clean. It's going all the way around. So what I need to do is I need to change the polygroup of this loop, so then I can detach the head really easy, right? And that's going to allow me to detach something without changing the topology of the model. So to do this, let's go into zModeler. I'm going to go to zModeler. I have this UI, and I have many videos, and there's thousands of videos on how to create custom UI. I have my zModeler dragged in my UI, but normally if you don't, you just go to brushes and press Z, and zModeler is going to be right there. So all of your brushes are going to be obviously in the brush section, right? But some of these, my favorite ones that I use the most, I just kind of have it spread out around my UI. And again, I have tutorials on showing how to do that as well. And even I brought in some custom brushes that I downloaded from the internet. And I'm actually planning on using the chain one. And that's also a tutorial on my channel if you just look for the chain. And then I just dragged it on my UI as well. All right, anyway, so let's continue. So if I go to ZModeler, right? So the first thing I want to do is I want to isolate this poly loop all the way around. How do I do that? If I hover over, let's look a little closer, and then press spacebar, and let's go into polygroup. Let's select poly loop, and now what we can do is we can just make sure this yellow line is pointing either left or right, and just simply click. You can see the whole loop changes color, right? And essentially what this is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to separate the head, which is great. Now, check this out. How do we change this entire piece, the whole piece, into its own polygroup color? Well, same thing. Let's hover over one of these polygons. Make sure you're not hovering over a point or an edge. You want to hover over the actual face. So that's important. Hover over the face. Any one of these faces will work. And press spacebar. Hold spacebar, and then on the polygroup, instead of saying poly loop, select something called polygroup island. Now, what is a polygroup island? Well, there's two islands, right? There's two separate red islands, the head and the body. And the reason they're called islands is because they are now separated by this river, this lake, right? So the lake is separating these two grounds. That's a funny analogy, but now if I click on this island, and I do have my active symmetry on, I can turn that off by pressing X and controlling my active symmetry. That's important as well. But in this case, by the way, if you hold on the S key, you can of course change the size of your brush. So that's important. Let's go ahead and click on this, and we don't want to click on the point or the edge. So that's important. Don't click on the point or the edge, click on the actual face. Now, if I click on this face, again, the whole island should change color because we just selected something called polygroup island, right? So let's go ahead and tap on it. And you can see the whole head just changed the colors, which is great, right? Now, what does this mean? That means we can now separate the head, and we can put the head into a different layer. So instead of having the whole mesh on one layer, let's go ahead and remove the head. How do we remove this head? Well, now because this whole thing is its own group, I can do Control Shift, and I can just simply tap on the head, and that's gonna hide the body, right? Now, next, if we jump into our tools here and click on Split, right, we can see something called Split Hidden. Now, Split Hidden is very useful, and that's gonna be used a lot. If you use ZBrush, get really comfortable with splitting things based on masks and things that are hidden. That's a very powerful and necessary workflow in ZBrush to kind of gain control, right? So I'm going to say split hidden, and voila, now you see the head and the body are split. If I turn this off, it looks like it's all the same, but the layer that is selected in ZBrush is actually going to be a little bit lighter. So you can see if I click on the body layer, right, this looks a little bit darker. So it's ZBrush is telling us what layer you're on. So there's a couple different ways you can select layers and jump between. They're called subtools. Different piece of geometry is called a subtool. Even though they are in the same subtool, they are technically different elements of the mesh, right? So I can simply click on each layer, and that's going to allow me to jump to a specific mesh, right? Or I can hold on the Alt key and I can just tap and switch it that way. So that's another way of switching between. So keep that in mind, right? Now, next, what I would like to do is I want to hide the head so I can start sculpting the body to what I think is going to make sense for our sci-fi character. So how do I hide this head? Well, what I could do is I can select the body, right? And then just like in Photoshop, there's an eye here. So I can tap the eye, and that's going to hide the head. Now this is interesting, right? By default, ZBrush, to keep things, super efficient and fast, it doesn't have a double-sided view, so you can't see your mesh through. And I think most apps by default will have this. So what you want to do is you want to turn on double-sided if that ever bothers you. And to do that, I actually have a button on my UI. If I just tap on it, it turns on double-sided. If you want to know where that button is, anything in ZBrush, if you just hover over it and press Control, it's going to tell you on the bottom in kind of a darker gray where things are residing. So this double button is residing in Tools, Display, Properties, Double. So what does that mean? Well, if I go to Tools, that's my tool. Then I find something called Display. That's going to be Display Properties right here. And there it is. There's the double button. So any one of these, whenever you see a button, if you just hover over it and press Control, on the bottom it's going to tell you its actual location. And of course, obviously, it's also going to tell you what each brush does. So you could take the time, and if you're not sure about something, you can just read that and gather a lot of information. All right, very cool. So let's go ahead and go back into the subtool. And now what I want to do is I want to start sculpting this body, right? Now, let's think about this. The body is currently, it includes the feet and the hands. Now, for the feet, I kind of want to give him my own custom shoes. I don't really need his feet. So let's do the same thing. Let's chop the feet off. And I know it sounds violent, but don't view it that way. We're just chopping geometry. Now, let's chop his feet off, and let's also separate other elements of the body that we want to sculpt on, right? So I think let's start with the feet, and let's do the same thing. So this is going to be a good way to practice our separation technique. I'm going to turn on my polyframe, and Shift F is the shortcut for that, right? I can do Shift F, and that's going to allow me to turn that on. And let's do the same thing. Let's find a loop, right? And start separating it. So I'm going to hover over, just figure out where you want, maybe where we want the feet to be cut off. And then the rest of this mesh, the leg mesh, I'm going to use as pans. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and when you press the Shift key, it's really important that if you hover over an edge and press Shift key, it's going to go into something called Edge Actions, and you can see it up here. It says Edge Actions. That means when you press spacebar, when you're hovering over something using ZModeler, you were hovering over an edge, and that's why it's called Edge Action. So all of these are going to be relevant to just the edge. If you hover over a point and press spacebar, you see it says Point Action. All of these are now only for the points or the vertices, right? Now what I want is I want face. So I'm going to press hover over a face, press spacebar. Now I can see I'm in polygon actions. So all of these are for the little squares, the little polygons, right? So let's do our thing again. I'm going to go to poly loop. And this time I want to make sure that I do this on both sides. So I'm going to press X, and that's going to turn on symmetry, and you can see that I can control what I'm doing on both sides. It's mirroring it across, right? Which is really cool. So let's do this. Let's find a first loop, or yeah, I think this will work. And if we zoom in, now if I zooming in, you can see I'm starting to lose my kind of a pivot. It's kind of all over the place, right? I'm trying to zoom in here, and to zoom in, I'm pressing Alt, and then I'm just clicking and dragging on my tablet, and that's kind of losing my point. But if I just simply tap something, let me switch my brush for 1 second. Let's switch my brush and just simply tap on this point. I didn't move anything, I just tapped. Now if I hold on the Alt and try to zoom in and out, you can see my pivot has been reset. So ZBrush resets the pivot based on where you tapped last. So that's really important to understand for new artists as well. So let's go back into ZModeler, and we selected the poly loop, which is great. And now I'm going to make sure that I have this yellow line going this way, or you can go this way, right? I'm going to go this way and just tap. And that's going to do it on both sides. Awesome. Now, how do we remove the feet? Same way, right? Let's do poly island and just simply tap. All right, and then to separate it, let's do Control Shift and click. Go to split and do split hidden. Now we have the feet by themselves. And once again, I don't really need this geo or these kind of you know, I would say ugly looking toes. We don't really need them. We could use them by changing the topology on these and then use that as the shoe. But in my case, because the character is kind of a stylized and cartoony, I don't really need any of this topology to match. So I just simply delete the layer and say okay. All right, now we have removed successfully the feet. If you lose your character, you can focus back by pressing F, and F is going to be kind of a thing in many apps, right? Maya is the same thing. F stands for focus. All right, very cool. So now we have removed the feet, we separated the head. What else do we need to do? Another thing I would like to do is I would like to separate the legs and the torso from the upper body, and these are going to be my pants. Let's do that. That should be really easy. Now you guys should be masters at this, right? All right, so let's decide which loop do we want to use. I'm kind of eyeing this one, so I'm going to click on this, and I think that makes sense, right? So that's going to be my kind of a pants. Pretty cool. Let me hover over this, do polygroup island. Let's tap on the rest of the legs. Control Shift, tap, split hidden, right? All right, very cool. Now, next, I would like to also, we're gonna add these cool big metal gloves that he's wearing. So let's separate the biceps and the forearm, you know, wherever the elbow is folding, right? So same thing, I'm gonna hold Alt, click on the body to select it. I'm gonna press X to turn my active symmetry. Let's go ahead and zoom in. And now in here, let's go ahead and press spacebar, go to poly loop. Let's go ahead and click. That's going to separate this piece, right? Or give us the division. Hover over face, go to poly island. Let's go ahead and tap. Control Shift, tap. And let's do split hidden. Now the arms are by themselves as well. Let's review everything. We can even turn the head on. We can see what's going on here. Very cool. So now we have this awesome control, right? We have full control over everything because everything is separated. So we can do whatever we want with the head. We could do whatever we want with the pants or the body. We've got the feet, or I'm sorry, the arms with the forearms, and we have the body. So he's ready, right? We just got our base mesh ready for the next step, which is going to be sculpting, and that's super exciting. All right, so let's go ahead and start sculpting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide my a couple things, right? I'm going to hide my pants or my legs. I'm also going to hide my head. And now keep in mind, whatever you're hiding, even though it's hidden, if I go into that layer, if I select that layer, it's going to show up. So ZBrush is saying, yeah, it's set to hidden, but you have it selected. So because you have it selected, I'm going to show it to you, which is cool because that means if you turn everything off and whatever layer you go into, that's the one that's going to be visible. Now, what happens if you have like hundreds of these layers? Do you one by one go through and check them? You can hold on the Shift key and you can just tap on one, and that's going to control them all together, right? So that's a cool trick as well. All right, let's go into the body one, and let's just start sculpting this into something a lot more, you know, stronger, a little more massive. And to do this, just like think of ZBrush as clay, right? When you are using clay, you would just literally grab your fingers and start pushing stuff around, right? So for that, the closest brush that resembles that would be like the move brush. If I hold on the S key, I can make my brush kind of larger. And let's just start sculpting. So again, I'm going to press X for both sides. And very gradually, like you don't want to make huge, you know, like this, huge moves. The trick to good sculpting, and if you watch any of the pros work, normally it's very small adjustments that are continuously made to change the shape in order to evaluate your choices, right? So you want to do something like this. You just do little movements and you start, you know, creating some kind of change, right? So in this case, you know, one thing I want to do is I want to make the shoulders much larger. I want to make sure he's strong, right? So if you look at the bodybuilder reference, and you know what, let's pull up a reference for bodybuilder. All right, here we are. I just grabbed a few different references that we could use, and these are pretty great, right? You can see the muscle flow, and whenever you're doing this kind of stuff, it's always best to pull up references. And this is a really cool also way to work, right? If we separate pieces, we can just kind of focus on each element. I think it's going to help us a lot, right? So my goal is to make the head, you know, kind of like the Hulk character, right? The head is going to be much smaller, but I do want the body to be kind of ginormous, right? So what we could do is we can also decide if we want to maybe close this hole and then have the head kind of move forward and down, right? How would I do that? How would I close this hole in order for me to, you know, start using it? And there's holes obviously on the bottom and the arms and all of that. Now, this is an important point. So I'm not modeling this in such a way where I need to keep this topology, you know, to be this precise flow. I can jump between different modes of sculpting, and then I can always dial my mesh back down using Z-remesher to get into like a low poly mode if I needed to. So what does that mean? If I jump out of polyframe, what I could do is I can turn this whole piece into dynamesh. Now, if I turn into dynamesh, again, think of it as like actual clay on your table. It's going to take this and turn it into kind of a blobby, sculptable clay that's high resolution. And that's exactly what we want, because then it's going to allow us to sculpt our character and do whatever we want, right? It's going to give us a lot of freedom instead of, you know, if I try to sculpt right now, you could see that I'm going to be fighting with this opening here, and that's going to keep it very limiting. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to switch this to dynamesh, and it's going to be, you know, let's start low at 128. Dynamesh is located in Tools, Geometry, Dynamesh, in case, again, you don't have it on your UI. But I'm going to click Dynamesh. As soon as I click Dynamesh, you can see that all the holes closed up. And now I kind of have this solid blob, solid piece to play with. Now, to quickly clean this up, if I wanted to maybe make it look a little, you know, more appealing, I can always polish it just a little bit. And that's going to give me, you know, a little smoother transition between the polygons. If I turn my polyframe, you can see it's still very low. And let me do auto groups too. By the way, auto groups is going to be in Tools, Polygroups, auto groups. So that's going to be one solid piece, right? And let's see, let's jump back out, and now we can start sculpting. And let me just start working, kind of mimicking what I'm seeing here, right? Not as high fidelity initially, right? We just want the basic shape. So don't look at the veins and all these creases yet. Just only look at like the actual shape of the big shape of the body, right? So obviously also keep an eye on your gizmo here of the character showing you which way you're facing. So I know right here is the back, right? So I'm gonna grab my move brush and I'm gonna start kind of moving these around to mimic what I'm seeing here. So I'm gonna give him this huge back, right? So let's do that. Ginormous shoulders. And there's a few different tools you can use. You can use the move brush or inflate, another one that could be kind of useful. That's gonna literally just start blowing things up very quickly. So I can give him a lot of mass very quickly, right? I can give him a huge back and give him maybe a larger chest. And you see what I'm doing? I'm doing it very gradually and very little, right? I'm not, you know, I'm not making anything ginormous. Like I'm not doing this, right? It's very gradual. All right, you can already see how it starts to feel like the body mass of this character is a lot stronger, right? Let's go back into move and let's just continue pulling these around and not being intimidated, only just focusing on the big shapes, right? And at any point, if you start seeing any kind of weirdness in your geometry, we are still at very low resolution. So simply do Control and drag, and that's going to re-dynamesh or retopologize the whole thing, right? So that's helpful. And let's just continue working on our mass or our base shape. If I wanted to, I can maybe push this in. And there's no right way of doing this, right? Because we're not really creating anything super realistic. Again, this is going to be almost kind of stylized. If I wanted to create these nice pecs, you know, the chest that I'm seeing, I can start extruding this. Now, another way I could do it, check this out. If I hold on the Control key, I can actually mask out the pecs or the you know, the part that I want to pull out. So do something like this. And again, I'm still in super low res, right? But now what I can do is I can do Control and click to flip the mask. And let's grab this inflate, and let's literally just inflate his chest a little bit. All right, we'll do something like that. That's kind of cool, right? Do Control and drag to get rid of it. And then what we could do is we can do just a little bit of a polish if you want. If you want to keep some of that detail, you can also do Control and drag to re-dynamesh. Maybe that's a little bit better. And initially, again, don't worry about things looking good. You first want to kind of create the necessary shapes to be present in order for you to continuously make them look better. Like now I have the chest and now I can make it look nicer, but I have the shapes here. So as someone who is new to sculpting, please understand that there's something called the ugly stage. The ugly stage is super important, where you're not judging your work. You're just kind of having all the pieces in place to start sculpting, right? So keep that in mind. And it's very difficult. It's difficult sometimes to go through that stage, because right away you want to make sure that your work looks cool, and you start kind of rushing a little bit, and that's not a good thing. I'm looking at this the back right here. You see this huge bubble that this guy doesn't really have it as much, but you have this huge back kind of flaring out. And if you know your anatomy, that's amazing, right? You can tell everybody the names of these muscles, and we're not going to hear you, but you can just say it out loud, and that's going to be awesome. So I'm going to pull this out right here, and let's do something like that. That's going to be this muscle right there, right? Okay. And let's see. So let's review his back. What else we got? So the back is kind of, you can see it's kind of round almost, right? It doesn't really have what I have here. It's more like this. I can hold on the Shift key if I want to smooth something out. But I do want to maintain kind of this piece here. Very cool. Let's see what else. So I'm not going to worry about, let's grab inflate. Let's just focus on this back shoulder right now. So for that back shoulder, I really want to inflate all of this here. Make it massive. Then you have these triceps here. Let's blow those up a little bit. We have the side shoulder. And the shoulder, if you study your anatomy, in most cases, it's separated into three pieces, three sections. So you have kind of the back shoulder, and then of course we'll do more definition moving forward. But then you have like the side, right? The side shoulder, and then you have like the front here. Let's blow up. Definitely, he's gonna check out this bubble right here, right? He's doing a lot of push-ups. I think that's 500 push-ups a day at least, plus some steroids. But you want to really pump this up, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So that's cool. Just Just kind of putting all the stuff in place. Remember, we're gonna have this. I'm intending to create this big metal piece here for his arms, right? So that's gonna be kind of going into this metal, almost like a glove, I guess. Let's do Control and drag to redynamesh, and let's see if we like what we're seeing. Now we can decide what kind of abdominal we want, right? Maybe we want to look at this shape here. It's kind of going, the waist is much smaller, right? You can see the waist is much smaller, and then it's kind of tapering out. So let's do the same thing. Let's just kind of grab the move and just start kind of moving this in. And at any point we can always adjust this, but let's kind of do the same thing. If we wanted to start doing the same thing with the muscles here, you see this awesome six-pack, and then you have kind of these rib cage. For that, I can grab something like the, let's grab the Damien Standard. And Damien Standard is nice because you can create that first line of definition. So I'm looking, both examples here have that, right? It's kind of the rib cage. So coming from the bottom, I can just do something like this and just start really pushing this in, right? And I can even go back again and start creating like this outline, right? And then let's do the same thing for our six-pack line here. We're just going to take a line and take it down, all the way down. Now, if you make a line, and you can do two things. You can go back up and make it deeper, or you can just let it go and press 1, and that's going to kind of automatically go back and do it for you. All right, so now I'm looking, I can see the six-pack, and then we have the belly button. Now, this is really interesting. If you study your anatomy, technically it's really hard to get a consistent reference for stomach, because a lot of references will have different things you're looking at. Some people will have, some references will have six-packs on top. You can see this character causes a six-pack, then you got the belly button, and then you got 2 on the bottom. So it's almost like 6 and 2, so that's like 8. And then you see like this human example, right? It's more like 4 and then 2 on the bottom with the belly button. And then you have like this part here that's also a double is what this is. So it's almost like 4 and 2, and then this one looks like 6 and 2. So it's a little bit confusing, especially if you're just starting out, how to properly do anatomy. But normally what you want to do is look at the reference of the human character, right? So you have the rib cage right here, and there's like right underneath the pecs you have this double division right here. It's like this, so that, and then you have the 4. So you go 1. Let me make this smaller. So you do something like this, right? So you have 1 here, 2, 3. Then you have the belly button, which is going to be right here. Push this in, press 1 a couple times, and then then it's going to go down into the kind of these 2 towards the belly, right? So something like that is technically what you want to do when you're doing this kind of stuff. Let's figure out what else can we do here. So I'm going to go back to move. And now if you wanted to, you could technically start creating more detail. And you know what? Let's do the backline as well. Let's do Damien Standard. And let's just press in this middle. You can see any reference you'll find, you'll always have this middle line going all the way to the tush. So let's do the same thing. Let's just go from, and you see it goes all the way up to the neck as well. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to grab this and just go boink all the way down. And again, don't worry about being perfect. It's just laying in the basics. But I'm almost doing it kind of in slow motion. Why? The reason I'm doing this is because it solidifies my understanding of anatomy as well. I'm enjoying this. This is fun. And I'm really keeping in mind the fact that someone might be completely 100% new And a lot of times when you watch other sculptors, they do super fast and they'll talk about a movie they saw, but they don't really explain what they're doing. And the next thing you know, you have this awesomeness, right? You're looking at this going, how did they just get here? But they don't really describe every line. And so I wanted to do that in this video. So now you have this kind of this indentation right there for the bottom shoulder. Let's go ahead and create that. Goes into the triceps, and it doesn't go just straight over. There's always like this pointy thing in the middle. So remember I said the shoulder is separated into 3 pieces, and then the middle one always has like this sharp end in the bottom. So if we do the same thing, we can separate these, but then you have kind of this sharp thing in the bottom here, and then you have something like that. All right. So that's interesting. And then for this piece here, we can just do like a little line there, and let's just stop there for now. So if I zoom out far away, it starts to see that this kind of makes sense. It does look like some sort of a body, right? For this muscle here, this is very definitive as well. So let's define ours too. We'll do something like that. And we can start drawing some of the muscles for these as well, right? So you have, it's going to depend, again, if you start looking at the references for this stuff, the muscles a lot of times obviously will reflect the pose of the character. So if his arms are up or even out, the back is going to look much different. So when I first started, I started looking at the back references. It was so confusing because literally every back reference I would find, they all look different. Everyone has different levels of muscle definition. Everyone has different arm poses. It's never symmetrical. So it's I would say it's really hard for a new artist to find something that makes sense. So in this case, I'm just going to follow this, right? You have these kind of lines like this. That's going to be your back. And we'll just do one here. And then you have 2 here underneath the shoulder. And anatomy for sculptors is something amazing. That's an amazing reference. So definitely look that up. And we can pull that up as we start to define this more and more as well. I want to maintain kind of this big back. So I'm going to grab my move. And let me just start pulling this out a little more. This is going to be like a huge body, right? Like think about Hulk, but maybe even a little larger. So I'm just kind of going extreme, or attempting to, I guess. So we'll do something like that. And that's funny. Now look at this and think about that first, base mesh that we grabbed of that skinny guy. So this is already a big difference, right? All right, let's do something like this. Now this is going to be where the little head is going to be right here, right? So I want to do something like this. And if I turn the head on, right, you could start to see what I'm doing. I'm just creating this hideous zombie looking guy. Let me turn this on. Now let's at least move this into position, and definitely we can't leave it like this, right? We're gonna have to sculpt this into something a lot more interesting. And before we sculpt anything on that head, let's move it. So I'm gonna go to move, and if I press move, right, I could see that my pivot is all the way down there, but the head is up here. Now, when we separated the head, we left the pivot doesn't know where to be, so it kind of still is very disoriented, right? It's still part of that body mesh. How do we take this pivot and move it up and center it on this head? How do you do that? Well, to do that, what you want to do is you can just simply click on this button here, and that's going to automatically put it into position, which is great. And now what we could do is we can just take this and start moving it into something that makes sense, right? So maybe we want the head just tilted a little bit, and maybe we want to, have it like, just figure out where you want it, but somewhere like here. He just really took a lot of steroids. So our guy is not really gonna have any neck. It's more like head into this massive body, and it's gonna be very stylized. And so don't compare this to an actual human, but it's gonna be more like this. And what I want to do now is let's just make a few changes to this. Now we can decide if we want to turn this into a dynamesh or keep it as is for now. Let's go into a move, and let's make this a little more impressive. So what would make this impressive? Well, the first thing you want to do is probably the jawline, right? Let's press X, and let's just maybe make this a little wider so it kind of fits what I'm seeing here, right? So maybe, he's not going to be a nice guy, so his eyes are going to be kind of maybe smaller, and he's going to be really, he's going to be upset, or he's going to be mean. And we can even decide, I'm kind of debating on whether I even want a nose, because it's going to be almost like a creature. If we do keep a nose, it's going to have to be much smaller, and I want to kind of try to remove some of this humanness and make it a little more creature-like. So let's do something like this maybe. Alright, and we can just decide if we want to keep it or not, but I want to definitely not make it a good-looking guy. It's going to be more like a creature. So I'm going to do something. Maybe let's definitely make the nose wider, and we can just actually pull this out. And right away, right, you see that it's starting to look a little more intimidating and maybe a little less human. Okay, so that's cool. Ears are going to have to be small, right? We don't want big cartoony funny ears. We want to kind of downplay the ears, because he can definitely hear, but he doesn't need big ears. So let's go ahead and make them smaller. And by making them smaller, the head will feel a little bit larger, and then you look at the body and that is even more, right? The whole scale is kind of crazy. All right, so I like this. Now let's decide if we want, what we want to do with the chin. Maybe make the chin a little bit stronger, and we can start maybe tucking in some of this, right? We're going to eventually probably make a connection here, or maybe we can give him some kind of a chain to hide the connection between the body and the neck. So I'm not really too concerned about that. For now, let me just do something like this and kind of start dragging this into something that, feels like, okay, his head is connected, and it makes sort of some sense, right? Okay, and we can decide if we want to connect it or if we want to just hide it. We could do a couple things. So we'll do that. Let's pull this in and do something like that. All right. Very cool. Let's see, what else can we do with his head? I'm not going to finish the head, but I do want to make sure that it looks interesting. So one of the things we could do is maybe push this in just a little bit and give him kind of a... The reason you want to do this on this type of characters, because then it feels like you can see his skull through the skin, and that makes it a little more scary almost. So you're like, you can almost visualize how the skull goes, right? And so I definitely want to like have these lines to be more definitive. Let's grab our Damien standard, just like start pushing this in, right? So holding down the Alt key, you can also start carefully pushing things out, and holding down the Shift, you can smooth them back in. So don't be afraid to experiment and play. But one thing that I'm going to keep saying over and over to new artists is that be careful with not making any big changes. it's much better to build onto your sculpt very slowly, so you have a lot more control versus very quickly things getting out of control. So if you look at the references, well, this is not really a reference, but we could use this as a face reference as well, right? If we look here, you know, I like these big eyebrows, so let's do something similar. I'm just going to inflate this whole section here, and I like the fact that he's very intense, and you can see how the eyebrows are kind of falling over, right? So all of this here is like mass, right? And again, I'm super low poly still. If you wanted to, you can do Control D if you felt like you need a little more topology, and just very slowly just start kind of. Right now I'm just using the inflate brush. I'm not even adding geometry, I'm just kind of moving geometry around, and do something like that, holding on the shift key. Now if I hold on the shift key, you can see it's smoothing a lot. How do I control how much it's smoothing? Maybe I don't want it to smooth at 100%. So if I hold on the shift key the entire time, up here, now by the way, the shift or the smooth mode will work for, doesn't matter what brush you're on, every brush will stop working and turn into a smooth brush as long as you're holding the shift key. So I could be in inflate, press shift, now it's smoothing. I can be in moving, press shift, and now it's smoothing. So keep that in mind, right? And let's talk about this. So if I hold on the shift key, I have something called Z intensity, and I'm holding shift the entire time. Now if I wanted a little less smoothing, I can always dial this down to, like, you know, 15. And now check this out, if I try to smooth something, it's a lot more gradual. So that's helpful, right? And you can see I can also, of course, change the Z intensity, or the intensity of the brush, of each one of these brushes here as well. So my shift is at 15, my inflate is at 10, and all of that is important information. All right, now let's start building some of this here a little bit. Very little. I'm kind of warming into this. I like these big cheeks. Let's do that. And this neck starts to feel a little bit almost too thick. So let's hold on the Alt key, and by holding on the Alt key, we can reverse the inflate and essentially deflate. So we can start deflating something, because I do want to maintain his kind of this sharp jawline, right? So we'll do that. Holding on the shift key, I can smooth things. And very gradually, I'm starting to kind of build some definition to this, right? We can decide if we want, what do we want to do with the mouth. Usually, you know, I don't think he's going to be screaming or anything. Let's just simply take his existing mouth, and, you know, later maybe we can give him a couple crazy teeth if we wanted to, but definitely want to make this smaller. Because we want the focus to be on the face and the body, not really the lips. So I'm going to make it a little smaller and make it more into kind of a tough look, right? All right, let's see, what else can we do? Let's go ahead and see what else we can do. Let's just maybe build some of this, just a little bit. If I go to inflate, I can start building some of this mass here, and do that. Holding on the shift key, I can smooth this. All right. All right. I kind of like this so far. So again, this is going to be a journey, right? We're just starting out, and this is going to be a process. So I think the next thing we should do is let's continue. So I'm looking at this definition here, right, between the neck and the chest. And we are currently don't really have any of these muscles. So let's go ahead and grab the inflate, and let's just hold on the Alt key. I'm going to select the body, and let's just create some of this movement that we're seeing. So we have this definitive line between the chest and the neck. So holding on the Alt key, I can press this in, and then I can start kind of inflating all of this, right? This is something like this. All right, so it looks like there's something there, and we'll continue to add more detail. Now, if you look at the chest, at least in my version, this is way too low. So another nice thing of why you want to keep it low poly is that at any point you can make big changes, make your brush kind of large, and you know, we can adjust all of this. So this can really move up, and all of this can move up. Right? And you can see how it's going from, it's angled, right? Mine is kind of straight. So to fix that, what I could do is I can just do the same thing, just angle all of this down, move this up. So now I also have kind of the same flow. So all of that is important, right? All right, now we can also play with the size of the head. Let's go into the head, and let's go into scale, and we can decide, you know, now by the way, it's important if you're playing with scale, let me undo that. Turn off your active symmetry, and that's going to be important because you don't want to have the head kind of splitting into two pieces, right? We can also center it, make sure it's centered, and now we can decide, you know, this is not what we want. I'm going to go the other way. And a lot of times you want to do something large to kind of reset your eyes, and now it's going to give you a better kind of feel of what are you trying to achieve. So of course you can decide what you like, but I really want to make sure I have a tiny little head and huge body, right? So something like that. Cool. And all of this is going to be, you know, we can give him a big chain on his head or something. All right, let's take a look at the legs. I'm going to turn the legs on. Now, this is definitely hilarious, but not what we want, right? How do we change the proportions of these legs to better match our kind of stylized body, right? Let's jump out of the perspective mode. So I'm going to grab my scale, and what I want to do is I want to change the pivot of my, well, I want to make sure I'm on my pants. Let's change the pivot. And what I would like to do is I want to move this pivot up here. So instead of it's being in the center, I want to move it up. So I'm going to unlock this and just simply move this up, right? And then I'm going to lock it back up. And now what I can do is I can just scale these in and make them a little more proportionate to what I'm trying to do as far as this character goes. Now I'm going to do even more. So he has really short legs, but he's going to be very muscular, and he's going to have pants on. So he's not going to have these this muscle definition, and we can even move this up. He's not going to have this muscle definition. It's more like going to be like big baggy pants. So I'm going to go to move, and let me just very slowly start moving these around, right? And if I wanted to get rid of some of this definition, we can just smooth it. So holding on the shift key, I can just, well, make sure your active symmetry is on. But let's just smooth this out and get rid of some of that detail. I don't want that detail. I want it to be more like, let's grab the inflate, and let's just start inflating this, right? And we want to, you know, if he's going to be this size, he's going to have very big pants. And let's go between inflate and maybe move. And you know, we need to be careful with the waist, right? The waist does make some sense. So you can see how big my brush is, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start like breaking this very slowly. And let's just start making the pants more baggy, you know, and start to lose some of that leg detail. So let's do something like that. From the side, this already kind of makes sense to me. This is what I was kind of going for from the side. So every direction is important. From the front, it still doesn't look good, right? I want to make sure that I take all of this and make it look baggy as well. So just something like this. And you know, maybe that's a little too much. I like to go over what I think is too much, and then dial it back down, because then you kind of push the boundaries and see, you know. I think it's better to go over the boundary and then come back versus not explore and don't try stuff and then never see what's possible. A lot of times you go over the boundary, you take it too far, and you look back and you're like, wow, that actually looks pretty cool. And normally I wouldn't think of that in my mind, but then that's one of the cool thing about exploring with shapes, is just doing that. Is just like taking it too far and then dialing it back down. Now, here's the thing, right? We are back into the situation of having this hole here, and something like this would be great for dynamesh as well. So as soon as I press dynamesh, you can see that this hole is going to fill up. Boom. And now what I could do is I can do control and drag to redynamesh. I can turn this on to see what that looks like, and that's fine. And then remember, we can do a little polish, right, to kind of clean this up a little. And more and more I'm losing some of that leg definition, right? Just going further and further away from it. Let's smooth this out. All right, let's go ahead and redynamesh, smooth this out. And if we wanted to, we can inflate this area. It just looks kind of weird, all pressed in. All right, so we'll do something like that. All right, so I think that's a little bit better. Now looking at the body, right, I can evaluate if I like this or if I think it still doesn't feel right. Let's select the body, grab our move. Let's go to, let's switch our pivot. And you see the pivot didn't go in the center. That's because my active symmetry is on. If I press X and do pivot again, now it's going to center it. And now what I would like to do is I want to change the feel of it. It feels too tall. It's too stretched. I want to stretch it this way. Something like that, I think, is what I want. I want to move this down. And I think that's a little bit better. Now the head, I'm going to grab the head, maybe make it a little smaller, put it down, and do something like that. All right. It looks super ugly right now, but it's still, again, this is the ugly stage. I promise we will make it look better. We're kind of still building a base mesh, really, just this entire time. And just then we'll gradually get into sculpting more details and adding more things to him. Like, you know, I want to have him have cool pants and have some chains and have like this metal arms, right? And maybe even add some stuff to his head that make him look more robotic. Maybe he has some metal elements. But to get to all of that, you still have to go through this base mesh stage, right? That's what I'm doing here. All right, next, let's go ahead and turn the arms on. And that's hilarious, right? So now this doesn't make any sense. Now, for the arms, because I want them to make, I want to make them into more of a robotic arms. I don't really want the forearms here. I just need to take the geometry for the hands, and then maybe we'll just expand that into forearms. So right now we have two arms that are here from the base mesh. Let's do this. Let's delete one of them. I'm going to turn off my symmetry, press Control, and drag a selection over one of the arms. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Split, and I'm going to say Split Masked. And now you can see that both arms have been separated, right? Now we can just decide which one we want. Do we want the left or the right? It doesn't really matter. Let's just take one of them and delete it. Okay. And then once we finish here, we can just mirror it across, right? Instead of working on two. Now, important point, make sure you save your work, right? To save your work, you just want to save the subtool. So just simply go to Load Tool, or I mean right here, and just do Save As. All right, so I just saved mine, and at this point, my scene or the tool is called Huge Sci-Fi Guy. And the reason I want to show you this window is because look at the file size so far. Because everything is so low resolution, it's less than 1 megabyte, 687K. So I thought that was really cool. Okay, so now the next thing we want to do is let's start breaking this up as well, right? So I'm going to turn on my polyframe. Let's go ahead, come here, and let's do our trick. Let's separate the wrist from the forearm. ZModeler, hover over a loop, go to poly loop, and let's go ahead and just click on. All right, and then if I just click on it, by the way, check this out. If I click on it, nothing's happening, right? Nothing's happening because we already poly looped this whole section from the body. So what I need to do is I'm going to auto group it to change the color. And now if I go back to that, you can see now it's working. So that's one trick. Let's go ahead and separate this same way, right? I'm going to go to Poly Island, click on that, do Control Shift and click. And I want my hand, I don't want this. So I'm going to do Control Shift and click again, twice. So now it's going to hide the forearm. And now what I could do is I can just say delete hidden. I don't need to split it. I can just delete hidden. Now if I say delete hidden, that forearm is going to disappear and delete itself. If you want to know where this is, that's going to be in Tool Geometry, delete hidden. All right, now I have this cool arm that looks like it completely doesn't match our character whatsoever. So we need to inflate it. Let's just use the inflate slider, and that's going to take us a little bit closer to where we need to be. And if you're wondering where that is, that's going to be in Tools, Deformation. So just inflate your arm, and just be careful. You don't want to overlap the fingers too much, because I'm not really sure what we're going to do with that yet. I don't know if we want to have his hands out or if I want to do something to this, but for now I'm just going to leave it like this. And you can see I did it carefully. I didn't go too much. I didn't do this, right? I didn't go over the geo. So if I wanted to, I could technically go in and do stuff, but this makes a little more sense. Now I do want the hands to be huge, right? I want the hands to kind of match the body. So how do I change the scale of the hands? I can just go to scale. Let's go ahead and change the pivot. And let's just make this much larger. And I'm thinking like freakishly large, something that matches this whole body here. So at any point I can make it even larger, but I like something like this. I can even turn this a little more and maybe put it in position. And it's almost like his hands are gonna go down to, for a scale reference, you can think of it as going down to his knees almost, right? All right, so I think that's pretty cool. And we can put him in a better position if we wanted to. Very cool. And let's go ahead and now create kind of the forearm. Now the forearm is going to be kind of this robotic piece, right? And I'm envisioning this piece to be part of the hand. I don't really want to keep all of these super separate. All right, so that's pretty cool. Let's grab our move, and what we could do is, holding down the control key, let's just select the top part of the arm, all of this here. Press control and tap to reverse the mask. And now if I just grab my move and make it kind of large, I can just expand all of this stuff to come up. And this is going to be kind of my sci-fi forearm, right? So we'll do something like that. And this doesn't make any sense, right? So we'll make sure it makes sense. And let's just go, so the bicep is going to go into the forearm. So the forearm needs to go out, you know, be out more like this, something like that. So almost like a glove. That's my vision. So I'm going to really make this ginormous. And we'll do something like that. All right, very cool. Now he has this huge thing. Now let's do this. Let's do Control and drag to get rid of the mask. And if we wanted to add more subdivision to this, right, we could do Control D, and that's gonna add more subdivision. Let's undo that. What would be another way of doing it? Can I just simply cut these and create like more polygons that way? Let's explore that and see if that's possible. So what I'm gonna do is let me move this over, and let's do this. Let's do Control Shift. Let's go into our quick pick, and in here let's decide. So we can really use knife curve, right? If we use knife curve, that's going to actually cut stuff, and we don't want that. I want to maintain this. I want to keep it. I just want to add more geometry. How do I add more geometry without removing geometry? Let's go, hold on, Control and Shift, go back into Quick Pick. And in here we have something called Slice Curve. Now Slice Curve is going to slice things without removing them, right? This one is going to slice and remove, and this one is going to slice and keep. So I want this one. So I'm going to click on Slice Curve. And what I can do is I can just do, I can create slices, right? And essentially what I'm doing is, you can see I'm creating my own kind of a, my own kind of a custom flow, right? Now if I do Control Shift and drag, this line appears. If I get rid of the Control and Shift, I can now control the angle of this. And then while I'm doing this, if I press spacebar, I can move this around. So you have a lot of control over the position of this. And then let's do something like that. And now every time you slice, it's going to give you a new polygroup color. If that's confusing, you can do Control W, or I just like to press this button here. Now you can see that because this is one mesh, I don't really need for it to have different polygroups. But now you can see you have all this extra geometry to play around with, right? So maybe I want to add one more here as well. I could do that. Let me go into this view, Control Shift, drag a line. Maybe just give me some here as well. Go boink. And then let's do Control W. All right, now I have a little more geo. Now I'm really not too concerned about topology being pretty or anything, because we're going to retopologize probably everything anyways if we decide to. But at this point I'm just interested in sculpting and having just enough geometry to play around with, right? Let me turn off my polyframe, and now I can sculpt stuff. So let me maybe adjust this a little bit better. Maybe I have some kind of a cooler position for my arms. And I do want this to be really bulky, right? It's almost like a robotic sci-fi arm, but I can smooth this out maybe. I don't want this guy to have like skinny wrists. Essentially, honestly, he doesn't have any wrists. It just goes from forearm to the hand, no wrist. Is my vision, so I want to get rid of all of that definition here. I can smooth this and do something like that. All right, now that's pretty cool. How do we get this on that side? We can always duplicate it, and we can always just do a mirror. And the mirror is located in button, path, tool, deformation. Okay, so now I have two of them. And that was a cool way to quickly create kind of a base mesh for our hand, right? So that's awesome. Let's do a little more work on this. This doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. So like, I want to press X. This needs to be more like this. And then I want the back to be more like that. And I'm just exploring, right? But kind of having fun. But it has to make sense. So I think that's a little bit better. Let's just pull this up. All right, this huge guy. Next, before we start getting into detail, let's go ahead and press Alt, maybe adjust these spans a little more. Let's do something like that. Again, I'm just gonna keep repeating myself. This is just the base mesh. So nothing too impressive, but kind of a give us a base to play with. Now let's talk about the shoes or the feet. Also, do you guys think he needs knees? I think maybe we should not. Let me jump into perspective mode. Maybe he doesn't need knees, but he does need some kind of a definition there. It looks kind of weird, just super flat like that. Let's go here and let's just start pulling this out just a little. Just a little bit, right? I'm not doing creases or folds or anything yet, but I just want to show that he does have knees. So do something like that. And you know, just for fun, we can always grab. Let's grab our pinch. Where's our pinch? There's the pinch, and we could just start pinching this a little bit, just for fun. Telling us, hey, the knees are there, don't worry. And then come back here, do Alt, and just pinch the other way, right? And just the form, right? The form already starts to feel just a little bit better. Let's do something like that. Let's see. We can also maybe pinch this here, so it doesn't feel so blobby, right? And all right, I think that's already a little bit better. Now let's bring in, I'm just thinking of just bringing in a sphere and just using that as like his, I'm visualizing kind of a big boots or big shoes. And what we could do is we could just take this whole piece in front and move it up, right? Like it's gonna go over the shoe. Like think about like super baggy pants falling over, right? So the back is probably gonna be down, right? And then the front is going to be something like that. It's pretty good. Now, to get the boots, let's do this. Let's just simply insert a sphere. And it's a big sphere. You can see by default, it's going to select the sphere. If you wanted to change the position of where it's being inserted, you can always drag this down to see more. And then these two arrows will control the position of the layering if you want to stay organized. So I can bring it down or I can move it up. So whatever you want. I'm just going to leave it down. That's fine. And right now it's too big. So I can always just use size. And the size is located in Tools Deformation. And the size is really the same as this, right? The scaling. Doesn't really matter what you're using. But let's go into the side view. Let's put it into position and press P to go into perspective view. I mean, jump out of perspective view. And let me bring this down for a second. Now, one thing I don't want is the bottom part of the sphere. I can do Control, let me go to draw mode. Let's do Control Shift, jump into, let's grab this knife rectangular. And then holding down Control and Shift, let's just slice this whole thing off the sphere. So boom, that's going to be my kind of a base mesh, right? If I wanted to, I'm not creating a shoe yet, but if you wanted to make something more interesting, you could do Control do like a mask. Oops, not a circle. Let's do mask rectangular. You can just mask this piece here, and then do Control click to reverse it, and then you can just inflate it. Right, so it just starts to look like some kind of shoe. Do Control and drag to get rid of it. Let's actually turn it into a dynamesh, and that's fine. It's very rough. Let's go ahead and do something like this, and now let's just actually put it into position and go to move, make my brush a little bit larger, and let's just decide what kind of shoes are these. What is this? I'm thinking like big sci-fi cartoon. Not really cartoon, but stylized boots, right? Again, just building a base mesh, something that we can start using to sculpt more stuff on. And it just has to make sense. So I'm thinking, well, that's a little bit too big, I think. I think something like that, right? Like big steel boots, I think is good. And this looks horrible from the front. Let me adjust this. Do something like that. So the front of the shoe is going to be more wide, right? And if you wanted to see better, like this is on the way, you can always go to solo mode and just take your time, give some love to this, right? So he's got the, obviously the big toe is going to be towards the body. So this piece here is the big toe. This right here is going to be his little toe, if he has toes. I don't know if he does or not, but like the shoe has to make some sense. I can hold on the shift key to smooth this out. All right, and if you wanted to move it down, you could do that. If you wanted to, you know, straighten the bottom, like let's say it's like this, and you want it straight, you know, just chop it off real quick. You can do that, and maybe do something like this. Keep chopping it off. Now we're designing shoes. That's exciting, and I'm still not loving this. Let's do something like that. Boom. All right, that's a little bit better. All right, let's jump out of the solo mode, put this into position, and I'm gonna go into perspective view and just see if this makes sense. Maybe scale it a little. All right, and then you know, when we make when we actually work on this shoe, obviously we'll just work on one and mirror it over. But for now, just so we don't this looks weird, right? We can always just for now mirror it over as well. And let's check this out. If you go to the body, or let's select the head actually, and just kind of review what we got. So right now, this is going to be a awesome start for a cool character with a kind of a custom base mesh, right? So that was the whole point of this. And it looks like the head doesn't really match the rest of the geo. Let me turn this down a little bit so it looks kind of more low poly as well, because everything is kind of in the rough mode right now. But you know, let's decide if we like the proportions, if we want to do maybe some touch-ups. Maybe if I select the body, right, maybe this is a good time to kind of evaluate what you have and see if you like where it's headed. And one of the things I personally I would like to adjust is, now also if you go into the perspective view, it's going to give you a really good vision. Like make sure you're not adjusting it in the perspective view, because that's a little bit too flat, right? When you're doing big adjustments, a lot of times make sure you switch so you could really feel the character and see how it's looking in like an actual 3D perspective, right? Now it does feel like this part here, for me personally, feels a little too skinny, and Let's do something like that. So I think that's even better. If I select the pans, I could adjust these. Just having fun, right? I'm almost thinking of this as like a toy. Some kind of a game character or toy or something, I don't know. So the proportions are crazy. If I wanted to blow that up, I can go to inflate and just expand this a little. And then once you inflate, a lot of times you start getting like really strange intersections. Then you can just, because I'm in dynamesh, I can just re-dynamesh this and you can see how it kind of fixes itself. Right? But again, I'm not sculpting yet. I'm just kind of reviewing. But I'm pretty happy with this. I think that's pretty cool as far as the base mesh. So we can do a lot of cool stuff. Right now we can just grab cool brushes. Let's grab like this chain, and you know, we can do chains on this guy, and you can see right away how it's gonna look really cool very quickly. This is something like that, right? And I can even, you know, make it larger or smaller or whatever. It could just get crazy really quick. But I think I'm gonna stop here, and in our next video, I don't want this video to be too long. In our next video, we can start playing around with more stuff and adding more detail to our character, and just really just have fun, right? Let me just maybe adjust these pans a little more. Do something like that. When you pull these out, like, did you see how I had that, like, it's pulling in? He doesn't feel as scary or tough. As soon as you take this top part of the leg and just start moving it out, you can see how it changes the whole feel of the character. That's so important, right? These little tiny touches. Now he feels a little more, I don't know, aggressive versus like legs going in, right? Just personal artistic preference. All right, I hope you guys made something cool on your end, and in our next video, let's just continue, and you know, we'll take it to the next step. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so yet, and I will see you in our next video.